Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday morning. I am Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté, and this is, of course, the show where we watch the Sunday morning news show so that you do not have to. And you should be very thankful you didn't have to this week because it was pretty much warmongering across the board because our ally, quote unquote, Israel, is decided to attack Iran completely unprovoked on the eve of a new round of peace talks. And what other reaction could one have? But this is great, and let's go to war and let's help Israel. That's pretty much the consensus across the board, although there's some exceptions. So great to have you here with us to break it all down. And as a reminder, our website is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content.
And a way that you can show your gratitude to us for sitting through these shows is by giving us a like. It's a very easy, free way to support the show. Just a thumbs up. And that's the way you can pay it forward. So should we start off with Meet the Depressed?
Let's do it.
Welcome to Sunday. It's Good Sunday morning. There are rising tensions in both the Middle East and here at home. Overnight, Israel launching new strikes inside Iran, targeting key oil and gas infrastructure, with Iran hitting back and accusing the U.S. of directly supporting Israel's attacks.
By the way, I'm really impressed that she said Iran hitting back. Like, I'm so used to the way that this is reported on as Israel retaliating against a first strike from Iran. So it's a very low bar, but congratulations, Welker, on that.
President Trump warning Iran, quote, if we are attacked in any way, shape or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the U.S. armed forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. In Los Angeles, active duty military troops remain deployed in the streets over the objections of California Governor Gavin Newsome to support the Trump administration's immigration crackdown.
California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived.
And for more information, go to GavinNewsome2028.com because that's, I mean, this is his time to shine. And look, he's meeting the moment. I think he's. Trump gave him a gift, I think, for his campaign, like ordering the National Guard when it was completely uncalled for. And Gavin's stepping up. He's stepping up to the moment. So he should use this to his political advantage because I think Trump gave him a really big gift because people might be divided on the issue of immigration, but I think it's clear Trump does not have majority support for sending in the National Guard to like attack protesters.
Right. Very much so, yeah.
And here in Washington, President Trump hosted a military parade marking the Army's 250th anniversary, the first parade of its kind held in peacetime in decades.
One thing I just want to add is, you just said, Aaron, that he's meeting the moment and Trump gave him a real gift. And it is true. And it's a reminder of how all of this helps move everything to the right. Because when you have Trump doing these things that are so extremist and extreme, and overt, then all the Democrats have to do is stand up to that, try to push back on that. And now there's like less pressure to provide anyone with anything. So just very depressing how that all works. Okay.
While across the country, tens of thousands of protesters gathered for what organizers called the No Kings protest, pushing against Trump administration policies. In Minnesota, those protests were overshadowed by a devastating act of political violence that rocked.
I'm pretty sure those No Kings protests were also No Gaza because from what I gathered, like the No Kings didn't address the issue of our time, which is, Trump now. This is Trump supporting mass murder in Gaza and now taking the war to Iran, where Israel has been bombing Iran relentlessly with U.S. support. And I think the No Kings protests stayed away from that issue, focusing on like the boilerplate Democratic Party stuff, like respect NATO, things like that.
Yeah, right. Standing with our allies. So the organization behind the No Kings protest is called 50501, which is like 50 protests in 50 states on one day. And they say that they're grassroots on their website. They talk about peaceful conflict resolution, but there's no info about the donors. But the heiress of Walmart, Christy Walton, did pay for an ad in the New York Times. And of course, Walmart has disassociated from that, and she's not involved in them anymore. And Trump has called for a boycott of Walmart, even though they are not supporting her. But yeah, it has very general things about like he's using our tax dollars for his party. No kings. They've gone too far. This is bigger than political disagreement. So kind of vague. And as you said, no mentioning of Gaza. Just like there really wasn't a mention of that on the hands-off protests.
No kings, no substance.
Yeah.
Sounds
basically.
familiar.
Yep.
The community. Authorities say a suspected gunman impersonating a police officer targeted 2 Democratic lawmakers and their spouses in their homes, killing former Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark. State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were critically wounded. A list of additional targets was found in the suspect's vehicle, as well as no Kings flyers. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz denounced the political violence and vowed to bring those responsible to justice.
This was an act of targeted political violence. Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint.
I mean, I think what happened was terrible, and we shouldn't settle our differences at gunpoint or with violence for various reasons. I mean, there's the moral reason, but also because I would say that the side that I would be on is incredibly out-armed. But I don't really agree with his revisionist history about the founding of the United States being not non-violent. I mean, the founding was violent. There was genocide involved. There was a revolution, conflict, armed conflict. Then slavery was abolished through war. America likes to install democracy throughout the world with violence. So yeah, I just think it's important. Not that I expect him to endorse violence, but
yeah. Also, I mean, one way to not promote resolving issues through violence is to not have really lax gun laws that allow everyone to be armed to the teeth with high-powered weapons. I'm not saying, and Tim Walz is not a supporter of that, so I'm not singling him out. But it's like when you have a culture that's constantly encouraging violence, guns, worships the aggression, does a lot of wars, regime change wars. I mean, you're going to raise the culture in a sort of violent environment, and that's going to seep down and have an impact. Yeah.
Again, the shooting is terrible. I mean, that political violence, this guy sounds like a terrible reactionary, like Christian right guy. So I'm not disagreeing with the condemnation of it. It's just the claim that this is not like consistent with who we are as a country. Yeah.
And they've apparently caught the suspect since Sunday morning. All right. Well, speaking of violence, we got ourselves involved in another regime change war. Why not, right? By backing Israel as it bombs Iran. And just to refresh people, there have been talks going on between the U.S. and Iran. New talks were supposed to be held on Sunday. And just a few days before that, Israel decided, why not? Let's just go ahead and bomb Tehran, and completely blew up the talks. And this was after Trump was making it impossible for the talks to get anywhere because he was imposing demands on Iran that he knew Iran could not accept. 0% enrichment, and also limits on its missiles. So basically he was telling Iran, like, you can't meet your energy needs, and you also have to be defenseless. So those are Trump's demands. But the talks were still ongoing, and under the cover of those upcoming talks, Israel decided to bomb Iran when Iran's guard was down. And now we're in the midst of a war with Iran striking back at Israel. So what is Benjamin?
And also, of course, it's ironic that this is the person who ripped up the deal with Iran.
Trump ripped up the deal that allowed Iran to have enrichment at a peaceful level as they're allowed to under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they're a signatory to, which Israel isn't, by the way. He tore up that deal, and then he also killed Qasem Soleimani, also taking advantage of like a diplomatic channel, because back then Qasem Soleimani was trying to help broker a reduction in tensions with Saudi Arabia. And when Qasem Soleimani arrived in Iraq as part of that diplomatic track, Trump used the opportunity to kill him. So this is basically continuing in that tradition, pretending to be in favor of diplomacy and using it for violence. Yes. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the guy,
Soleimani, I always have to add, Soleimani, a hero and a very handsome man.
Very handsome, very handsome.
Silver-haired fox. All right.
So Benjamin Netanyahu, he went on Fox News and basically couldn't hide the fact that really this has nothing to do with Israel defending itself, its security, blah, blah, blah. This is about regime change.
So is regime change part of the effort here?
Could certainly be the result, because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. It's plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people. 80%.
So first of all, that's not true. Like as the annual threat assessment of the United States intelligence community, although as Max Blumenthal likes to say, it's neither community nor intelligent, says that there isn't, they do not have atomic, it says, we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons programs he suspended in 2003. In the past year, there has been an erosion of decades-long taboo on discussing nuclear weapons, but yeah, there's no evidence of that. Okay, let's go back.
Of the people who throw these theological, they certainly don't have the people. 80% of the people who throw these theological thugs out, I mean, they murder. Okay,
so this is interesting. I don't know where he gets that statistic about 80% of the people. I assume he probably just made it up, just like he makes up the ratio of civilians to combatants killed, or as he would say, civilians to terrorists killed. But also, he calls them theological thugs. I mean, doesn't that describe Ben-Gvir and Smotrich? And actually, it describes Benjamin Netanyahu, given that he likes to cite Amalek, which is a biblical reference.
Yeah, it pretty much describes the entire state of Israel, which is based on ethno-supremacy. The belief that like one religious ethnic group is superior to others. That sounds like theological thuggery. And yeah, as you said, in justifying committing mass murder in Gaza, he cited the Bible and Amalek, because Amalek are like lower human beings who have to be wiped out. And that's how he sees the world. And that's why he's attacking Iran, is because Iran resists that Israeli agenda. And just as Israel goes after all factions and groups that resist it, it's gone after them one by one. Syria was the big one, the dirty war in Syria. It drew in Hezbollah and Iran, which was the plan by Israel and the US to draw them in, to bleed them. And then after that wore them down, after October 7th, they had an opportunity to go further, and they've destroyed Gaza. They went after Hezbollah in Lebanon and, suffered. They inflicted a pretty severe blow on Hezbollah there. And now they're taking the chance to go after Iran. This is what all this is about. But they're seizing the moment. So back to Netanyahu.
They oppressed them for 46 years. They've yearned for freedom. I mean, they shoot women because their hair is uncovered. They shoot students. They just suck the oxygen from this brave and gifted people, the Iranian people.
So now he's doing the classic thing of, yes, the Iranian government is repressive. There's no doubt about that. And there's a lot of discontent with them over that. There's no, that's not in dispute. But to say, first of all, shooting women for not being covered, that's not true, actually. And even if it were true, Netanyahu shoots tens of thousands of people and with bombs and guns for being Palestinian, and now for being Iranian. So he's not in any place to like lecture anyone about murder, because he's the biggest mass murderer in the world.
Yeah, right. So he's accusing the Iranian government of doing to its own people what the Israeli government does to Palestinians on a, even if what he said is true, Aaron, this is on, there's no comparison, right? I mean, he's killed thousands of women and children, students, as he mentioned, and not only to Palestinians, but he's also doing it to his own people, because, you know, given the Hannibal directive and the fact that there was a mass Hannibal on October 7th, given the fact that they bombed Gaza in places that the hostages were being kept, and that some hostages reported that they were more afraid of being killed by Israeli bombs than by Hamas, and that Hamas would actually try to protect them from these bombs. Also, there was the confirmed shooting of 3 hostages who were speaking in Hebrew and waving a white flag, and then the likely killing of 3 other hostages when the IDF bombed tunnels with toxic gas, and then lied about it. And when a woman, a mother of one of their soldiers, the soldiers put something about that on his tombstone, they destroyed the tombstone. So, yeah.
The problem with doing a Netanyahu clip is that he lies so much that it's impossible to get through like more than 10 seconds without pausing to correct all the lies.
Right. We could do an entire Monday morning episode showing just one Netanyahu clip.
Just one clip. Yeah, it would take the whole show because every second is a lie. Every word's a lie.
Yeah.
And you know, the Persian people and the Jewish people have had an ancient friendship. Goes back to the times of Cyrus the Great. That could happen again. But again, the decision to act, to rise up at this time is the decision of the Iranian people. We decided to act because we saw enough uranium, enriched uranium, for 9 bombs. And all they had to do was weaponize them. We stopped that by we're attacking their nuclear sites. We attacked their chief nuclear scientists working. It's like Hitler's nuclear scientists. Would you leave them? Of course not.
Okay, so note how he says, I think he realizes when he says nuclear scientists that maybe that doesn't sound very good to say that you're killing scientists. So what does he do? Like Israel always does, they bring in Hitler, and he says it's like Hitler's nuclear scientists. Would you leave them? Of course not. But actually, if you're the United States, you don't just leave them, you hire them, like the U.S. government did with Operation Paperclip, which was this secret intelligence program where they brought over more than 1,600 German scientists and engineers and technicians from Nazi Germany to work for the U.S. government, and several of them were confirmed members of the Nazi Party, the SS and the SA. So that's just a funny talking point to come from him.
We attacked their top command. I can inform you, Brett, that moments ago, we also got the chief intelligence officer and his deputy in Tehran, because we're now over the skies of Tehran. Our pilots, our brave pilots, are over the skies of Tehran, and we're targeting military sites, nuclear sites. That's what we're doing to take out those 2 threats. Unlike the Iranians, who your reporter said correctly, they're targeting our civilians.
Yeah.
They bombed at least 1 hospital. They bombed water treatment plants. They bombed gas fields. All this is civilian infrastructure.
Israel has done that.
Yeah. Israel's done that.
Not Iran.
Yeah, Iran. And of course, and on top of what they did in Gaza, which is destroying the entire thing, which is all civilian infrastructure, because Gaza has no military, has no air defenses.
Right.
It just has like armed resistance fighters, you know, fighting Israeli soldiers, like when they come in, and they have rockets that like barely do any damage. But so, I mean, and again, where is is there any journalism here from Brett Baer? Can we question this guy on anything at all? Like all these, you know, like Hitler analogies. It's just like basically like Fox News, like most corporate TV, is just Israeli state TV. No pushback whatsoever on anything.
Bombing our civilians. So that's the difference. They're a terrorist regime. We can't have Iran have nuclear weapons. And by the way, our intel shows that they intend to give these nuclear weapons to their Houthi proxies and others. And that's nuclear terrorism on a global scale.
Wow, where have we heard that one before? Oh, yeah. They said the exact same thing in the lead up to the Iraq war, that Saddam was going to give his WMDs to Al-Qaeda.
Right.
And other fictional actors who he was not working with, because he didn't. And on top of that, he didn't have WMDs. And Benjamin,
and they're total ideological enemies, also. But not that anyone cared about that part. Yeah.
Benjamin Netanyahu was one of the biggest promoters of the Iraq War. So basically, he's like, like this playbook works for the Iraq War. Let's just rip it out and dust it off and use it again.
Yeah. And also, the crying, the woes me over the killing of civilians. Like, obviously, they target civilians systematically. This is not about killing Hamas combatants in Gaza, but also just when you talk about the attacks in Iran, as you just brought up. So we know that, let's see, they targeted an apartment in Tehran and killed at least 60 people, of which 20 were children. And that was all to target 1 or 2 people, apparently. And as we know, just going back to their prolific terrorism, they randomly set off pagers throughout Lebanon in what Leon Panetta, former CIA Leon Panetta, described as a terrorist attack. And they, of course, decimated blocks in Beirut, killing countless civilians. Oh, and they of course killed paramedics, and they killed Palestinian paramedics, children. They sniped them in the head and the chest. So yeah.
And the last thing is they have plans to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. Right now, 8,000 kilometers, very soon, just out a little distance, and they can reach the eastern seaboard of the United States. These people who chant death to America, try to assassinate President Trump twice, killed 241 of your Marines in Beirut, killed and injured thousands of American soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, try to bomb a restaurant in Washington, D.C., chant death to America, burn the American flag. Do you want these people to have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to your cities? Of course not. Yeah. So we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending the world.
I want to talk about.
Oh, wow. So that's also from the Iraq WMD playbook, that if we don't act now, they're going to have the weapons to bomb our cities, the eastern seaboard. The exact same thing we heard during the Iraq War. It's just such a complete joke. Iran's been under threat for decades. I mean, you can take it back to the 1953 coup, where the US and UK backed the overthrow of Iran's nationalist government, because the government, like the president Mossadegh, he wanted to use Iran's oil for Iran, not for Western oil companies. And then you have the Shah imposed by the foreign powers. And then you had in the 1980s, the US taking the side of Saddam Hussein in his war against Iran, among many other crimes. So, I mean, that's why Iran feels the need to defend itself and have ballistic missiles, not to threaten American cities, but just to defend itself from constant aggression from the outside, as it's facing right now. And the question is whether this Israeli aggression backed by Trump will now compel Iran to actually seek nuclear weapons, which it's long resisted doing. It has a fatwa against it. And as you mentioned earlier, U.S. intelligence even says there is no Iran weapons program. What they've done, and you can argue about whether strategically or not this was wise. Like people I follow, like Scott Ritter, think this was a bad decision. Others think that Iran had no choice. What they've done is they've enriched at a level to put themselves on a path to becoming a nuclear weapon threshold state. And their argument there is like, since we're under constant threat, we need to do something to give us some leverage in these talks. So that's why we don't want a nuclear weapons program. But if you're going to keep threatening us, we're going to give ourselves at least the possibility where one down the line we can develop one, because you keep threatening us. Now, one could argue that that's not tactically wise or not. I don't know. But the point is, they don't have an active nuclear weapons program, and they wanted negotiations, and there was a deal which they were adhering to, which Trump broke. And that's just like how Benjamin Netanyahu is not reminded of that anytime he speaks. Is just it's such a dereliction of journalistic duty. But that's whatever. Like the entire existence of the media on matters of war and peace is dereliction of duty. So, but look, here's Bret Baier. He's going to push back on one claim that Netanyahu made, where he said that Iran tried to assassinate Trump twice. He's going to mildly push back on that claim by Netanyahu that Iran tried to assassinate Trump twice.
I want to talk about President Trump. You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with them in a way that is weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars.
Okay, he's such a liar. So
Such a liar. Whenever his lips are moving, that's how you know he's lying.
the Iran nuclear deal, the whole point of it was capping enrichment at like 3.6%, which is strictly peaceful. That was the Iran deal. That's what they were doing. They were adhering to it. So now he's claiming that no, this is going to put them on a path to a bomb. It's such a lie. And of course, like, what evidence does he have that Iran tried to kill Trump? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He can't even pretend. It's so yeah. So that's the one point, I guess, we'll get something approaching a critical question that, hey, you just said that Iran tried to assassinate Trump twice. Do you have any evidence for that? And then he says, and then he says one of the reasons why they want to kill Trump is because he's decisive.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? He's constantly changing his mind, and whether he's decisive or not, why would that motivate Iran to try to kill a U.S. president?
Right. He's just trying to, just like he did in the former clip where he's trying to like link the survival of America to the survival of Israel. And that's why they talked about Hamas being ISIS, because ISIS obviously has a very international program that Hamas does not. So he's trying to link it to the two countries' fates together. And he's also trying to flatter Trump. I mean, it's like disgusting. You'll see it gets even worse in this clip. Oh, but also he's not fake agreement. I mean, even as, to echo what you just said, Aaron, about how he's far from decisive. I mean, that is even something that Hexeth praised Trump for. He described it as, strategic unpredictability. So yeah, choose a better talking point, BB.
This fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich. He's been very forceful. It's
so funny that he says he basically tore it up. Like, he's giving him credit for tearing up a deal that Trump now is upset that they're not making.
For them, he's enemy number one.
Yeah.
Look, they also tried to kill me, but I'm.
Okay, first of all, if Iran really tried to kill Donald Trump twice, do you think Donald Trump would be sending his top envoy for all these peace talks with Iran and saying, like, Iran, I want to make a deal with Iran? If they really tried to kill Trump twice, no. He would drop a nuke on Iran or something, or he would certainly attack Iran if they actually took that allegation seriously. It's just such a complete joke. Yeah, like, let's go sit down with the government that tried to kill me twice. Yeah, like, why not? Sure. Is it?
Right. Because Trump is so diplomatic.
He's so diplomatic, yeah. And it's not as if he takes things personally,
Right. I mean, he like basically killed Soleimani because they were in a meme war on Twitter.
Me number one. Yeah. Look, they also tried to kill me, but I'm his junior partner.
When did you
understand?
Ew, he's so gross and smarmy. And you see how he's trying to, they tried to kill me too, but I'm Trump's junior partner. He's smart because we do know that Trump really is motivated by these things. But it's just disgusting. And I really want someone to make up a rumor that Netanyahu called Trump's penis small or something. I feel like that's the only way to get Trump to abandon or push back at all on Israel. So let's see if we can do that. That's a joke, YouTube. I'm not spreading lies. Okay.
And President Trump is a great threat to Iran's plans to weaponize nuclear weapons and use them. American pilots are shooting down drones that are headed towards Israel, as do our pilots. American THAAD missile batteries are helping defend Tel Aviv and greater Tel Aviv area. American Aegis ships are in the Mediterranean. That's all a decision by President Trump, which I deeply appreciate. Again, his decisions on what to do at any given time is the president's decision. I trust his judgment completely.
So disgusting.
Yeah, I think what he's saying there is Trump's going to join him soon in directly attacking Iran. I really hope that's wrong, but just based on how things have gone so far, it's hard not to expect that. Trump pretending to engage in diplomacy and then Israel blowing all that up, and then Trump going around saying, yeah, this is great. I think this is great. Trump is either really moronic and he thinks that somehow getting Israel to bomb Iran will help with the negotiations, or he's just totally in on it. He's totally in on it, and he thinks and he wants regime change, and he doesn't care about negotiations at all. It's either choice is really bleak, and we'll have to see. But
yeah,
It's
And
okay. Yeah.
well, another thing is someone in the comments, I can't find it now, but he said that Bibi called Trump fat. And you know what? Maybe when he said he was his junior partner, think about it, juniors are smaller. So I'm not actually I'm not unconvinced. That could be a thing. Bibi may have been body shaming Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, if you're watching this, just want you to be aware of the possibility that he was body shaming you and calling you fat. Also, please, guys, we are this is so painful for us to watch. And we have 2,866 people watching, and we only have 1,000 likes. I know more than half of you are not hate watching. Let's get this number up. I'll give you a chance. By the end of the next clip, I'm going to be checking in again. So if you haven't already liked it, please do. All right, what's next?
Let's sit through one more Israeli official. This is the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon.
We expect moral clarity. Moral clarity means that the world will understand that we are actually doing the dirty work for the entire democracies all around the world. For decades, Iran played around. They chose the path of deception, of lies. And we decided that we are not taking the chances. We believe the Iranians. On Friday in the Security Council, I looked at the Iranian ambassador and I told him, I believe you. When your leaders say that you want to exterminate the state of Israel, we believe you. When you say you want to build a nuclear bomb, we believe you. So we take it very seriously.
They've never said they want to build a nuclear bomb. Okay, they've never said that. So what is he talking about? like, how can we believe you when what you're saying is just so objectively false?
Aaron, what if Hitler said that? Are you saying that they should let him say that? Because Hitler could have said that. Yeah.
It's like they explicitly say we don't want nuclear weapons and we want to have a nuclear deal. So, this whole thing about Iran trying to wipe out the state of Israel, what Iran has said is that Zionism should end, an ethno-supremacist state should end, an apartheid state should end. By which they mean they want to see Israel have equal rights for everyone who lives there. That's what they mean by that. That's the Iranian threat to Israel. Now, meanwhile, Iran has actually sometimes been a lot more conciliatory. They've endorsed previously calls for a two-state solution, which would preserve the ethno-supremacist character of Israel, but just in its recognized borders prior to 1967, and let the Palestinians have a state in a very small sliver of land in the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. Iran has endorsed that. Israel, by contrast, has never endorsed the idea of a contiguous Palestinian state because it insists, because they're ethno-supremacists, on stealing all the Palestinian land they want. So on the issue of recognizing statehood, Iran is far more conciliatory than Israel is. And to the extent they say that, they want to end the Zionist regime, they're talking about an ethno-supremacist state, by which they're saying there should not be apartheid in Israel. That's what they mean by it.
Yeah, and also if that's a justification for war, then what about Israel saying they wanted regime change and destroy Iran?
Well, that's the thing. So, and contrary to, and if only it were just words, what do people do in action? Israel and the U.S. invest a lot of money and resources, as we're seeing now, in trying to foment regime change, in arming militias in the region to bleed Iran and its allies. I mean, in action, it's Israel and the U.S. that are infinitely more committed to Iran's destruction than vice versa. Iran's actions have gone to basically resisting Israeli-U.S. aggression.
Yeah, and they use a lot of restraint, right? If they wanted to destroy Israel, remember when Israel killed the Iranians in the consulate in Syria, which is a war crime, right? You're not allowed to do that, even though the media made it seem like it was not a clear call. What did Iran do? They responded with very weak. Their response was not only was it weak, they also coordinated with the West in telling them when and where they were going to drop whatever they did drop, which is exactly not what you do when you want to destroy a country.
Yeah, they don't want war. They've tried to avoid this. That's exactly right. That response was so restrained because they were trying to avoid exactly the situation. Because look, they're in a tough position. They're not only up against Israel, which has nuclear weapons, but is a smaller country than Iran, but it has nukes. But it's not just Israel. It's they're also up against the entire U.S. System of hegemony, which includes military bases throughout the Middle East. And they've been bled in Syria, which was the point of the Syria dirty war, which is to bleed Iran and its allies. Hezbollah is weak because of Israel. So they're not in a position to fight a war, they tried to avoid it. But Israel now brought the war to them. So anyway, it's impossible not to spend so much time correcting these Israeli liars, because that's all they do. But let's get through the rest of this clip.
The threat of Iran, and what we are doing now, we are eliminating the risk for Israel, but not only for Israel. Today, those ballistic missiles are flying to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They can reach New York City and Miami. Give them a few months, they will have the technology and the ability to do that. So we are preventing Iran.
This is the exact same thing in the Iraq War. Saddam's only a few months away from having WMDs, the mushroom cloud. Like the answer, if we don't act now, the answer will come in a form of a mushroom cloud. Literally the exact same thing. They can't even come up with new ways to lie.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like a classic. It's an oldie. It's a classic. It never gets old, I guess, for these people. And yeah, remember Netanyahu addressed Congress in the U.S. and said that Iraq had WMDs and that that the U.S. had to go to war against them.
All right, let's turn to some of Israel's biggest cheerleaders. They're loving life right now, seeing U.S. weapons being used to pummel Iranian civilians.
Oh, sorry. Let me just correct myself. He said what he said about Saddam Hussein was that they were feverishly trying to acquire nuclear weapons. That's what he said.
Okay, well, someone who's feverishly on board with Netanyahu is Senate Intelligence Chair Tom Cotton.
When it comes to differences in intelligence assessments, the U.S. intelligence that was made public in March said at the time the U.S. does not assess Iran's building a nuclear weapon, and that the Supreme Leader has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended back in 2003. Was there more recent U.S. intel sharing or intel indicating that there was some kind of sprint for a bomb? Because that seems a very different assessment from what Israel's claiming.
Well, unfortunately, Iran enriched a lot of uranium to near weapons grade over the 4 years of the Biden administration.
But that's not weaponization.
They are close to having a.
So Margaret Brennan made a good point. Iran's enrichment was not weaponization, because as we just heard, according to U.S. intelligence, Iran doesn't have a weapons program. And what Tom Cotton's leaving out is that the whole reason Iran enriched during the Biden years was because Trump tore up the Iran deal. And when under the Iran deal, as soon as one party violates the Iran deal, then Iran is no longer obligated to follow its terms. So Iran, trying to basically force the U.S. back to the bargaining table, went ahead and started enriching at a higher level. That's exactly what they did. And Tom Cotton wants to make that think as if that's somehow proof that they're developing a nuclear weapon, when their whole point was to try to get the U.S. to return to the deal that the U.S. broke.
Right.
Enough pure weapons grade uranium for several weapons. Now, that's not the only step to having a weapon. You also have to have the weapon design. We've seen indications that Iran is once again exploring those weapon designs. And then if you want to use a missile, obviously you have to marry up the warhead to the missile, but Iran has other delivery methods as well through terrorist proxies. So I think that's one of the reasons why both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu thought things that were coming to a head. A second reason is Iran is rapidly producing ballistic missiles, both medium range to target Israel and short range to target our troops. And they add substantially to those stockpiles every single month. And
this is what it's all about. They don't want Iran to have the means to defend itself because they want regime change. That's their goal. They've already achieved it in Libya. They achieved it in Iraq. They achieved it in Syria. Iran is next. And so Iran is trying to develop missiles to defend itself from aggression. Recall General Wesley Clark. He talked about the list of countries that were marked for regime change after 9/11. Some of them have already been successfully overthrown. The ones I just mentioned. Iran is on that list too. So of course, if you're Iran, you're going to develop ballistic missiles because they also don't have a nuclear weapons program. And so even though having a nuclear weapon would ultimately be a deterrent, since they don't want nuclear weapons, they need to find other ways to defend themselves, and hence why they develop ballistic missiles.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to another giddy warmonger. Senator Lindsey Graham, joined by another giddy warmonger, Senator Richard Blumenthal.
And remember, guys, Blumenthal's a Democrat, Lindsey's a Republican, so it's a really beautiful example of bipartisan belligerence and warmongering.
You said you believe it's in America's interest to go all in to help Israel finish the job. It sounds like you mean offensive support.
So the worst possible outcome for the world is for the Iranian nuclear program to survive after all this. How do you destroy their program? Through diplomacy? I prefer that, or through military action. If diplomacy is...
By the way, one reason I also think they're obsessed with destroying Iran's nuclear program, which again is not a nuclear weapons program, is because they don't want Iran to be able to meet its domestic needs.
Right.
Because if Iran can't do that, then that will foment unrest and that will help the cause of regime change. I'm pretty sure Max Blumenthal made this argument first, so I'm sorry if I'm appropriating it from him. I can't remember. Yeah. Or maybe I came up with it myself. I don't know. But maybe Max said it first. Anyway, like the point is, I think that's something to consider too. Is like they just don't want to have, because why would you insist on zero enrichment when there's a level of peaceful enrichment that's allowed under the Non-Proliferation Treaty? It's a common thing. I mean, and Iran has that right too. So if you won't allow any enrichment whatsoever, what other motives could there be? Well, maybe you just don't want Iran to be able to meet its domestic energy needs because you want the population to suffer, which happens to be the U.S. playbook in country after country, including Iran. That's why the sanctions have been imposed, to make the people suffer.
Yep. We are so good at that.
Not successful, and we left with the option of force, I would urge President Trump to go all in to make sure that when this operation is over, there's nothing left standing in Iran regarding their nuclear program. If that means providing bombs, provide bombs. If that means
busting bombs,
whatever bombs. If it means flying with Israel, fly with Israel. The worst possible outcome.
You know, Kate, I can think of someone smiling down from heaven right now, singing his favorite song.
Let the Eagle Soar?
No. Bomb, 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 Iran.
Oh, right. You're right. Oh, my God. Of course. John McCain. Yeah. Bomb, 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 Iran.
Former partner in crime. I think
yeah, it's true. But, it also made me think of the great John Ashcroft song, Let the Eagle Soar, like it's never done before, from Shining Shore to Shining Shore. Let the mighty eagle soar with something in its wings as the ground beneath her sings. Only God, no other kings or things. Let the mighty eagle soar. We could do a mashup of both of those.
And maybe the No Kings protest can use that for their, exactly. No other kings, no kings.
I don't know. That's what I was just thinking.
They could work that.
And Ashcroft was in the Singing Senators. He had a solo career and also was in the Singing Senators with 3 other people. R.I.P. Gone too soon.
Outcome for the world is to take the Iranian nuclear program on and leave it standing. Mm-hmm. That will be a disaster.
Senator Blumenthal, what's your view? How involved should the U.S. get?
Let's begin with the basic proposition that ought to motivate American policy as well as the world's. A nuclear-armed Iran is an unacceptable threat to the world, not just to Israel, but to the United States as well. And I support Israel's right to defend itself against this existential menace. I'm very concerned.
Its right to defend itself against a country that wasn't attacking it. There was no war going on. Israel started it. And then these people come out and say, Israel's a right to defend itself. Against what? Against Iranian water pipes, which they've destroyed our hospitals. Iranian nuclear scientists who are working on Iran's nuclear energy program. These people will just say, let Israel do anything and say Israel has a right to defend itself. It's just, terms lost all meaning.
Go-to is the right to defend itself, even when it's not at all defending itself, or the Holocaust and Nazis or anti-Semitism. That's like their go-tos. Or you're Hamas. Blank is Hamas, whatever's Hamas. The UN's Hamas, UNRWA's Hamas, yeah. Also, when Lindsey Graham said he prefers diplomacy, no one believes that for a second. I mean, this is the guy who encouraged Trump to rip up the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he got like a talking point, like a note saying, "Hey, just Lindsey, just make sure you throw in like throw a bone towards diplomacy."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We got to pretend that we want to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have more Lindsey Graham for you.
Senator Graham, the thing with diplomacy is that the Israeli prime minister is calling for the Iranian people to rise up against the regime, a regime he says is calling for the destruction of his state. It doesn't really seem like there's a compromise there, if it's truly this existential. Is this just leading us towards the outcome you say, which is the United States getting involved in military conflict?
Well, this is what I would love for the regime to fall. If you don't, if you want this regime to stay in power, you're wanting people to oppress the Iranian people. You want people to threaten their neighbors, to be the largest state sponsor. Who wants the largest state sponsor of terrorism to stay in place? But regime change is not the policy of the United States. It is not the purpose of this attack yet.
It's so funny. Regime change is not the policy of the United States. When, like, what's that list of countries that the U.S. has regime change around the world? It's like there's dozens of them, all these coups and regime change wars.
Yeah, and even in recent history, like you just referred to, Aaron, you got Libya, you got Iraq.
Yeah, Syria was just succeeded. Yeah. And by the way, it's funny to call Iran the biggest state sponsor of terrorism when the U.S. just embraced the new Syrian government, which is led by the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who up until recently had a $10 million bounty on his head by the State Department because he was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria.
Yeah, but he got a great terrorist makeover.
Yeah. Okay, more Lindsey here.
But if there's one attack on an American anywhere in the Mideast by Iran, then you'll get regime change. So what are we dealing with? We're dealing with a non-negotiable part of the deal. They can't have a nuclear program that can make a bomb. Diplomacy is preferred, as Dick says, but force may be the only option. And I've said as clearly as I can say, if diplomacy fails, Mr. President Trump, you've been great. Help Israel finish the job. Give them bombs, fly with them if necessary. I cannot stress to you how, if you want to get Russia right, you want to make China be better, you want to convince international terrorism we mean business, you got to finish the job with Iran.
So it's always about sending a message to a different country with him. So remember with Russia, it was, if you want to get Taiwan right, you got to fight them in Ukraine, right?
Aaron, I'm sorry. I don't mean to undermine you, but you mispronounced it. It's Taiwan.
Taiwan, sorry. Yeah. So it's like, now he's saying, if you want to get Russia right, you got to get Iran right. So it's like, it's this constant puzzle that like where every area of the world where the U.S. wants to control, you have to then control this other part of the world, or else it's all going to slip from our hands. It's like the domino theory. It's like Lindsey Graham's version of the domino theory. Exactly. Really, really bizarre. Right. And so we're going to murder Iranian children because we want to send a message to Russia now. I think that's what Lindsey Graham is saying.
That's a good look. Yeah, very good look. Yeah. Before we go on to the next clip, by the way, I just want to show a tweet. Let's see, Wilson. This is 1C. We have this, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's up on the screen.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So as we reported tonight on Channel 14, an Israeli news channel, a significant escalation. Israel is now actively working to destabilize the Iranian regime through a newly approved strike plan authorized by Defense Minister Katz and Prime Minister Netanyahu. As part of the operation, regime targets in Tehran will now be attacked, accompanied by the mass evacuation of civilians from those areas as a means of applying pressure on the regime in response to attacks on the Israeli home front. The plan is designed to trigger a mass exodus of civilians from Tehran and serves as a powerful lever of pressure on the regime in a way that could destabilize it. In this context, Defense Minister Katz's statement today can be understood as a message to Khamenei, quote, Tehran will be treated like Beirut, which, by the way, is a reference to the Da'iya doctrine, which was applied to Beirut, which is when you respond with disproportionate force as to increase the unpopularity of the people in power, and also to act as a deterrent. But that another way of saying that is that you commit war crimes. That's what responding with disproportionate force is, because under international humanitarian law, you have to use the principle of proportionality as well as distinction. And the Dahiya doctrine, which they're now applying in Iran, violates both of those.
Yeah, and listen, since this is the same playbook that they've used in Gaza, let's talk about Gaza for a second, because this Iran conflict has now flared up, and so people have taken their focus off of Gaza. But what's happening in Gaza? Daily massacres still. Today there was another massacre of people lined up for flour. There's like photos of dead civilians next to flour bags. That's the reality that's ongoing in Gaza, which now it's hard to imagine this, but gets even like already it was being completely whitewashed and minimized and overlooked. But even now it gets even less attention because of the conflict between Iran and Israel.
Yep. So disgusting. And there was even a disgusting headline that was like, with Iran front, with the Iran war, like the pressure to feed Palestinians is eased or something.
Yeah, that was in The Guardian. Good old Guardian. Yeah. Okay. This is Warmonger Day on Monday morning. So let's hear from another one, Ted Cruz.
Trump drew a very clear red line in the sand. He said on April 12th, he told Iran, you have 60 days to negotiate. I led a coalition of 52 Republican senators, and we all said we stand with President Trump. President Trump has been clear that the standard for any deal must be complete dismantlement, no centrifuges, no enrichments. There is no reason a theocratic lunatic who chants death to America should have nuclear weapons, the tools to murder millions of Americans or millions.
All right. So look, I think the important thing here to address is like Ted Cruz mentioning that Trump had a 60-day deadline for Iran to make progress on the nuclear talks. And it's true. Trump did lay down that deadline. But why is Israel enforcing it? Like, it's Trump's deadline.
Right.
Israel's only enforcing it if Israel and Trump are completely in cahoots, which means that the diplomacy was a complete smokescreen. So by invoking this deadline that Trump laid down, since it was Israel that enforced the so-called deadline, and that's what happened, according to the Wall Street Journal, Netanyahu said to Trump, it's been 60 days, we have to act, and Trump said, okay. Whether that's true or not, the point is Trump gave his blessing for Israel to enforce his own deadline, which means that he was working with Israel hand in hand all along. And especially given that there were supposed to be talks scheduled for Sunday, for yesterday, and Israel attacked on Thursday. So from Iran's point of view, yes, Trump had said that deadline, but they're supposed to have talks on Sunday. So what's Iran supposed to think? Iran's like, okay, we're talking on Sunday, so I guess you're okay with the progress so far, given that we're about to meet on Sunday. Those talks on Sunday were a ruse to give Israel cover to bomb.
It's like you're going to break up with someone, but then you say you also want to go on a date the next day. Mixed messages.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the great Backstreet or NSYNC song. I think Backstreet Boys. Quit playing games with my heart.
All right. Do we want to hear a little more Ted Cruz? Okay, a little bit more.
All right.
Yeah, we got it.
On the 61st day, the Ayatollah publicly said he would not shut down a single centrifuge. He said he would build more centrifuges. He would make more enriched uranium in order to make more nuclear weapons. That was effectively, Maria.
No, that's not what he said, because he's the guy who has a fatwa against nuclear weapons.
Right.
What he said was that Iran is not going to give up its right to peaceful enrichment. And yeah, they had this policy of enriching at a higher level that would put them on the path to being a nuclear weapon threshold state, to give them leverage in the talks.
Right.
You can question that strategy,
Yeah.
But then you can also say, would it have mattered anyway? Because even if Iran had enriched at 3.6%, would it have mattered anyway? Because according to these people, to Trump and Israel, any enrichment is a red line. So it doesn't matter what Iran does. And
Ayatollah Khamenei said, we've told the Americans, what business is it of yours whether Iran pursues enrichment or not? The Americans want us to abandon our progress. They oppose Iran's progress and the enrichment of our nation, which goes back to that point that you made that was either created by you or Max Blumenthal. Who knows? You're a Max Blumenthal puppet. You're pushing Blumenthal talking points.
Blumenthal talking points. Yeah. Unless I came up with the idea myself, I just don't remember.
Right. In which case, if he ever cites you, we know that he's pushing Maté talking points.
No, but I'm pretty sure he said it first, and I like to give credit because I've had my talking points. I'm very sensitive about talking point theft. It's a
right. True, yeah.
very sensitive topic. Anyway, okay. More Ted Cruz. Let's hear this.
Middle finger at President Trump, but it was also a message to Israel. We're not going to stop. And if you don't act, you're going to find out when we've achieved success with a mushroom cloud in the skies of Tel Aviv or New York or Los Angeles.
Senator, do you
Does that
want
sound
to
familiar to anyone? Well, we'll go back to that. Is there more of this? Should we keep
No,
watching or do you want? Okay.
No,
so, Aaron, does that line, that mushroom cloud line, sound familiar to you?
It definitely sounds familiar.
It does, right? So let's take a little trip down memory lane and listen to George W. Bush. Let's hear what he had to say in the context of 9/11 and the Iraq War.
Our enemies would be no less willing. In fact, they would be eager to use biological or chemical or a nuclear weapon. Knowing these realities, America must not ignore the threat gathering against us. Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
So I guess like a good Texan, speaking of stealing talking points, he just committed Cruz just committed the sin that you hate so much, which he didn't credit the source of his talking points. So that was a Bushian talking point, of course, used to justify the war in Iraq and push a lie. And it speaks to the impunity of war criminals and also the cowardice of the media that he felt like he could say something like that would, in most people of a certain age, remind them of the lie of George W. Bush. But because George W. Bush has been rehabilitated, in part because of that, he's comfortable using a talking point that should force the media to say, like, wait, why are you using a talking point that was used to argue for a war that we now know was based on the most charitably mistaken evidence or non-existent evidence or outright lies?
I wonder sometimes, like, is there just such impunity for these malicious lies, these warmongering lies, that it doesn't even occur to Ted Cruz that using the mushroom cloud line is a direct ripoff of the Iraq war propaganda?
Right.
Or are they trolling us and they have these meetings where, like, you know what? Let's say the mushroom cloud thing. That would be so funny because we did that back in Iraq. So let's do it again. And, like, let's just totally troll everyone. And, like, there's nothing they can do about it because we run the world. So let's just use the same lie. I don't know. It's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. But this is the culture. And again, no challenge there. Not going to happen certainly on Fox News. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay. Let's turn to, we've heard from a lot of Republicans. So let's hear from a Democrat, Adam Schiff. What does he have to say about Trump backing these Israeli strikes on Iran?
By the incapacity of its militia, of Hezbollah and its other actors, the state-sponsored terrorism that engaged in once it's been weakened. I think they found this the opportune moment to go after.
Okay, this started a little bit too late. Hold on. Let's go back a little bit. Okay, here we go. Okay.
Well, first of all, I think Israel has a right to defend itself, and I support what Israel is doing to defend itself. Israel clearly made the calculus that at a moment when Iran has been weakened by the incapacity of its militia, of Hezbollah and its other actors, the state-sponsored terrorism that engaged in once it's been weakened, I think they found this the opportune moment to go after a nuclear program that was coming closer and closer to fruition.
Okay, you know what? Actually, that's some rare honesty, somewhat, from Adam Schiff, because he's saying that
Aaron, that must
Israel.
be so painful for you to say out loud.
Well, no, it's refreshing because what he's saying is Israel saw an opportune moment where he saw that Iran was weak. So he's saying this has nothing to do with self-defense. This is Israel pursuing its hegemonic goals. I mean, he's not actually consciously saying that, but that's, if you read between the lines, he's saying Israel saw an opportune moment when Iran was weak and it seized the moment. Yes, Israel did exactly that, because also there was diplomacy going on, and Iran thought they were engaging in diplomacy, when meanwhile Trump was just using that as a cover to let Israel do exactly what it just did, which Adam Schiff supports, because he starts off by saying, of course, that Israel has a right to defend itself. So he's on board with Israel striking Iran. But what he's admitting in defending this is like, this has nothing to do with self-defense, and this was just Israel capitalizing on a moment of weakness, which is like the definition of aggression. You're not under threat. You're capitalizing on your opponent's weakness, and therefore you want to attack them, attack civilian areas. That's textbook aggression, which Adam Schiff endorses.
I support those actions, and I support the administration's actions in helping Israel defend itself. In terms of whether the administration should go further and engage in direct hostilities against Iran, that's not something I support. Now, I have to caveat that by saying I have not been able to get recently an intelligence briefing on whether Iran is trying to break out to get a bomb. But I think the United States should be very loath to engage in another war after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there should be a very high hurdle to get over before essentially going to direct war with Iran. So support, defensive support for Israel, yes. In the absence, in my view, of seeing more compelling evidence that this is in the imminent national security needs of the United States, I wouldn't go beyond defensive support. But I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help Israel protect itself against these incoming missiles, projectiles, drones, and other attacks.
And Senator Schiff, as you know, President.
So Adam Schiff, okay, he's not at least like reflexively on board with going to war on Israel's behalf, but he's also open to it. He's saying, yeah, if I see some credible intelligence, so I don't know, if Ted Cruz keeps saying mushroom cloud like they said in lead up to the Iraq War, maybe that will be convincing intelligence to get Adam Schiff on board. Who knows? There's certainly a precedent of Democrats being convinced by phony intelligence to justify evil wars.
Yeah, long history of that. Another moving example of bipartisanship.
All right, Rand Paul, we have our critiques of him, especially on domestic issues and even on foreign policy issues too, where he says he talks sometimes like an anti-war game, but he often votes to fund the very wars he claims to oppose, including giving money to Israel to murder civilians in Gaza. But here's Rand Paul on the issue of U.S. involvement with Israel now.
Iran refuses this offer of the United States. I strongly believe it is in America's national security interest to go all in to help Israel finish the job. How do you respond to Senator Graham's call to go all in and help Israel finish the job, Senator?
Well, his initial response was game on, and I don't consider war to be a game. The hundreds of thousands of people that potentially will now die on both sides,
I'm so not used to hearing anything like that. Like the warning against killing people, the framing of killing people as bad. I'm like, what is happening? How is this coming from a politician, especially Republican?
A couple thousand years, we've had this discussion over what is just war. Not only our civilization, but other civilizations have had this discussion. And one of the things that many people came to a conclusion was that preemptive or preventative war wasn't just. And so there is that. But there is also the idea that what happens to Iran, you imagine what happens in Iran now. Do they coalesce around their government, even though their government is unpopular? Does nationalism thrive? And you would think that they would probably be less likely to want to negotiate at this time, particularly when they may feel that negotiations were a ruse to put them at ease until the bombing happened. So I think it's going to be very hard to come out of this and have a negotiated settlement. I see more war and more carnage, and it's not the U.S.'s job to be involved in this war. Iraq was a mess. Afghanistan was a mess. And one of the things I like about President Trump is he has shown restraint. And so I think his instincts are to not be involved in this war, but there will be a lot of pressure from Lindsey Graham and others to get involved in this war. And I hope that his instincts will prevail.
All right.
It's interesting, Aaron. Sometimes one of us is unavailable to do Monday morning because we're traveling, right? And we get a substitute host like we've had on Bree, Michael Tracy, Kate Willett. I feel like Rand Paul could be one of our substitute co-hosts because what he just said up until the part about Trump being anti-war is something we like. He just sounds like a useful idiot host.
Yeah, well, the problem is if we got into domestic policy, like for example,
oh yeah,
Medicaid,
of course, right.
welfare, then we'd have then it'd be like a brawl because
right. But he could have co-hosted his episode.
This episode, yeah, well, listen, Katie, if you're saying you would have rather hosted this episode with Rand Paul, I accept the criticism. I accept the criticism. I'll reflect on it.
I feel like I could have stepped out and Rand could have filled in for me. Yeah.
Well, listen, let's actually address the fact we even did this episode. We told you last week we were not going to be doing this episode today, but the reason we did it was, and the reason we weren't going to do it was because we're both traveling. I just flew overnight to Hungary. I just got here, and Katie, you're on the road too. You're in
Vienna, where we had the amazing first ever Jewish anti-Zionist Congress.
Very cool. But what happened was Israel bombed Iran, and so we decided, how can we not be here for you guys to start the week off with some of the scummiest people on TV celebrating this epic crime that Israel has just committed and will only get worse. So that's why we're here, and we're grateful that you're here with us. And I want to just show one news item. This was in the Wall Street Journal today, and it's a headline, and it says, a battered Iran signals it wants to de-escalate hostilities with Israel and negotiate. Messages passed by Tehran through intermediaries seek a return to talks if the U.S. stays out of the fight. And that speaks to the thing we've been talking about throughout the show. Diplomacy has always been an option. It's only Israel with U.S. backing that has now blown that up. But right now, Iran is signaling that there's still an opportunity for diplomacy. And the question for Trump is, will he listen to his Israel first donors, which he's done so far, or will he remember what he promised everybody, which is that he's going to be a peace president? You know, and I suspect, unfortunately, if I was making a bet, I would go with his Israel first donors in terms of who's going to listen to, but you never know. And the least we can do is, you know, try to just speak the truth and try to raise our voices. And that's something everybody can do now, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. This is a very, very dangerous moment, but you know, there are still opportunities to de-escalate if Trump decides he doesn't want to be just one of the biggest chumps in world history by going along with Netanyahu.
Trump, this is your chance to prove you are actually America first. You are actually not an Israel cuck. You aren't Netanyahu's bitch. Lot riding on you on this decision, so we encourage you to choose wisely.
Okay, well, that's our show. Katie, anything you want to close with?
Let's see. This it was so cool being here for the anti-Zionist first Jewish anti-Zionist Congress. Actually, Aaron, I read a comment from Gabor Maté, because I wanted to bring the voices of Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against the genocide, because I think that's an important part of the Jewish voices against genocide. And we also had here in the flesh the great Stephen Kaposh, another Hungarian Holocaust survivor who's been speaking out against the genocide. He's based in England. And because I'm still traveling, I'm showing a pre-tape, but it's a really good one. It's with Jim DiEugenio talking about Martin Luther King, who killed him. And
this
it's also
the Katie Halper show.
Right, this is the Katie Halper show, Tuesday at 7 p.m., right? Tuesday at 7 p.m. And also an interview with another Holocaust survivor, Peter Cohen, based in Amsterdam. So yeah, this is great. And hi to everyone who came to the show, to the Congress, because of our mentioning it here or on the Katie Halper show. That was excited.
Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for tuning in to Monday morning. We really appreciate you joining us. If you want to support the show, keep us going, and get bonus content, go to usefulidiotspodcast.com. We really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching Monday morning. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.